So y'all know we usually talk Miami Heat on the channel, but because the Heat got absolutely blown out yesterday, I started talking a little Dolphins. We got into Jim Harbaugh, we got into the coaching search, and during that time I said how much I love Brian Flores, and I was really disappointed the Dolphins let him go. I also went on to say how I'm not particularly the biggest fan of Stephen Ross, and lo and behold today, we get the class action lawsuit that was filed by Brian Flores. In his lawsuit, Brian Flores is suing the NFL, the Miami Dolphins, and the New York Giants. Starting with the New York Giants side of things, he's suing for the obvious discrimination that they had against him. I want to start off by reading this tweet from RG3 who said, Brian Flores effectively had to end his chances at coaching in the NFL to point out what we all already know about discrimination in the hiring process for head coaches in the NFL. Something that I agree with, and also Will Mansell who writes, RG3 is right. Everybody knows the Rooney Rule, which seemingly made with good intentions, can be used as a sham during the hiring process. That's also something we know to be unfortunately true, and this case is a good example of that. For those that don't know, the Rooney Rule is a policy where NFL teams have to interview ethnic minority candidates for head coaching positions and front office jobs. There's all kind of specific rules to it. For example, they have to hire at least 2 ethnic minorities. One of them has to be in person. But the bottom line is the policy tries to give minorities an equal chance at landing the job. Unfortunately, we know that's not always the case, especially with Brian Flores and the New York Giants. So how did we even find this all out? Well, we would have never known if Bill Belichick didn't accidentally mistaken Brian Flores for Brian Daboll. And here's the official text change that was part of the actual class action lawsuit. Bill Belichick basically says, congrats, it sounds like you got the job. Brian Flores responds, did you hear something I didn't? To which Bill says, the Giants. Brian says, I interview on Thursday, but I think I have a shot. To which Bill essentially says, oh, from what I've heard, you're already their guy. At this point, of course, Brian Flores is a little confused about what's going on. So he texts Bill, he says, Coach, are you talking to Brian Flores or Brian Daboll? Just making sure. And eventually Bill Belichick realizes his mistake and he says, sorry, I effed this up. I double checked and misread the text. I think they're naming Daboll. I'm sorry about that. So essentially what happened is Bill Belichick thought he was congratulating Brian Daboll on being named the position when really he was mistakenly texting Brian Flores. And of course this is kind of BS because Brian Flores didn't even interview yet for the Giants job. So essentially when he did go into that interview, he really had no chance of getting the job because the Giants already had their guy in mind. So sure, the Giants checked off the Rooney Rule box, but they never really gave Brian Flores a fair shot. Now the Giants already released their official statement saying we are pleased and confident with the process that resulted in the hiring of Brian Daboll. So they're already claiming their innocence, but I guess that's for all the lawyers and detectives to figure out. Although after reading that text thread between Belichick and Flores, I don't think Belichick would have sent that text unless he knew for sure that the Giants were hiring Daboll. And of course, how could they know that if they didn't even interview Brian Flores yet? Something that I was thinking after the Giants released that statement is the same thing that Barry Jackson wrote on Twitter. He basically says, while the Giants have responded to the Flores allegations, the Dolphins haven't yet. And if Flores' claim of Ross offering to pay him to tank and tamper for a QB is patently false, one would think the Dolphins would publicly deny it. And as the point of this recording, the Dolphins haven't came out and said anything yet. So as far as the Dolphins side of things, which Barry Jackson mentions in the tweet, apparently Stephen Ross was offering to pay Brian Flores $100,000 per loss during that initial tank season, and he was mad when Flores didn't want to accept that and the Dolphins kept winning. Honestly, after everything we know about Stephen Ross, that doesn't exactly surprise me. And not only is that illegal for so many reasons, but it's also just plain stupid from a football standpoint. Tanking does not lead to success. Although I say that as the Cincinnati Bengals are in the Super Bowl. But putting together a culture of losing does no good for you in the long run. Look at the Philadelphia 76ers. Trust the process. That's the stupidest saying in sports. That basically just means, yeah, let's lose on purpose so we can get better. What kind of culture are you building? What kind of mindset are you building? That whole tanking process is just plain out stupid. You want to build a team of winners and guys who put forward the most effort, and that's what Brian Flores was doing. Initially, Stephen Ross wanted Brian Flores to tamper to get a quarterback, and Brian Flores didn't want to break the rules. He didn't oblige. But then Stephen Ross invited Brian Flores on a yacht, in which that same star quarterback just so happened to be there. When Brian Flores found this out, he left, he wasn't happy, and apparently ever since then, he hasn't been treated the same since. Of course, Stephen Ross has a big ego. He's rich, he thinks he can get away with anything. When Brian Flores didn't want to agree, Stephen Ross said, all right, you know what? I don't need you. And since that time, Brian Flores has never really gotten a fair shot. People are speculating that that quarterback in question was Tom Brady, and as Adam Beasley writes, apparently Tom Brady said he would have chosen the Dolphins over Tampa if not for Brian Flores. So maybe this whole situation kind of explains everything, but there's really no way to know for sure. So as I'm recording, the NFL actually did release their official statement, and they ended by saying, we will defend against these claims. which are without merit. So we'll see what happens. I don't want to really give my opinion on the situation because truthfully, I have no idea what happened. I wasn't there, so I can't fully speak one way or the other. But what I can say is I love Brian Flores as a coach, and his players played really, really hard for him. It would have been so easy for them to quit on him so many times, but they kept pushing through and getting progressively better throughout the year, every season that Brian Flores was here. And also, again, we don't know what's true and what's not, but Stephen Ross and Chris Greer really tried to paint the picture that Brian Flores was hard to work with, and he didn't get along with Tua, and he said all these nasty things to him. Just from obviously a very outsider perspective, Tua Tagovailoa seems like one of the nicest guys in the entire world. And the fact that they would say Brian Flores would be mean to him and say all these things, that was just kind of hard for me to believe. Unfortunately though, Stephen Ross and the NFL are the ones with all the money, so they'll probably come out with a win here. And a lot of people are speculating, of course, that Brian Flores will never coach again. I certainly hope that's not the case, but I do like what Razor Ramon said on Twitter. He said, "This likely won't be the end of Stephen Ross as the Dolphins owner, but if it is somehow, I'd build a statue of Brian Flores right next to Don Shula." It's been really frustrating having Stephen Ross as the owner of this team for the last however many years. But I don't really want to get on Stephen Ross too much either because I don't fully understand the situation. And I definitely wouldn't say he's been a cheap owner, which is a positive. It just seems that because he's an absentee owner, he doesn't really understand Miami and what the Miami fans want and need. But that's really all I got to say about this situation. I just wanted to upload a quick informative video with all these new details that are coming out. The plan is to be back to y'all tonight with a recap of the Heat Raptors game. If we don't lose in triple overtime, that's a win in my book. I'll see y'all then.